Hey guys, and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Profits. Today we're going to do our final wide receiver rankings video, at least for a while, and then we're going to step to our tight ends. We're going to do some mock drafts. We're going to do risers and fallers, preseason news, and a lot of fun things. But we want to get through this and let you know some of the more deep-ish kind of guys that you need to be targeting, you need to be looking at. We're going to start here at number 21. As always, there'll be timestamps in the description down below, so you can hop around and see the order and just listen to the research that you want to hear about the guys you want to hear about. So that should be really fun for you guys. And we got some huge news. We're going to be talking about Josh Gordon has been reinstated into the NFL, and we're talking about him today. He is in our rankings, and I think a lot of people are going to disagree with this, but we have him a lot higher than most people would put him, and some other things going on. So that's what we're going to talk about. Let's get right into it with our first guy here at number 21. All right, guys, so here the first guy we got to talk about here at number 21 is wide receiver A.J. Green. A.J. Green is an absolute phenomenal talent. I'm not going to waste any time talking about stats about him. He's having an amazing year. Or excuse me, an amazing career as a whole. This guy's a tier 1 talent. He's elite. He's insane. He is phenomenal. He's not necessarily young, so in a dynasty league, that's a different discussion, but that's not what we're talking about today. Now, there's the injury concerns last year, how that plays into this year, what his health is right now, and how that's going to affect things. If you were completely healthy, he'd be higher than this, but he's far from completely healthy, and so we put him here at 21 because of his ceiling. But quite honestly, it is very realistic he finishes well below 21, and so this is one of those risky picks that before I say anything else, I'm going to say, hey guys, if you plan on drafting A.J. Green, you better have your running back situations figured out. You better have your tier 1 wide receiver, your top guy, and you better be a mature fantasy owner who knows how to work a draft and get a deal. I want to read some quotes about his injury that really support the fact that his injury recovery is not going that well right now. And I know that that's really negative news, why we put him here, and that's, again, this guy has been elite. He has been dominant. Last season he was averaging 13 points a game before he got injured in week 8. That was just standard leagues. Imagine what he's getting in PPR leagues is even more. He was having a great year. For starters, Ian Rappaport says, following surgery based on what they found cleaning out his ankle, it is expected that he is going to miss a few games. That right there is bad. It's expected he's going to miss a few games. A few games, by the way, and because I don't know if a lot of people know this, as far as NFL language goes, a few games, probably talking 3 or 4 games. That's a quarter of the season. That right there, you take 25% off of an elite talent, that already takes him out of tier 1. Even if he starts tier 1, you take out 3-4 games, boom, you got to bump him out to tier 2 or tier 3 immediately. So that right there is a major concern, but the injury may go deeper than that. For example, even if he misses 4 games but comes back, he's not going to be himself for another 2 games. And so then those 2 games or 3 games or 4 games after that are going to be kind of 50% as far as fantasy numbers go. Let me read a quote from head coach Zach Taylor. He came out and said, there's a good chance Green is going to miss multiple games, a few games. He said it's a little more extensive than we initially thought. But hopefully it's not going to be more than a few games. And so he comes out, he is very uncomfortable with that. Hopefully it's not going to be more than a few games. That suggests that it very well could be more than 3 or 4 games. Now, I expect a competitive guy. He wants to play. This guy's awesome. He's very talented. I imagine they're going to try to rush him back as soon as possible, and it's only going to be 2, 3, or 4 games. But yeah, a guy who's, I believe, going to be 30 years old this season, very, very well could be more than that. And so that's where he lands at. Guys, simply put, this is a high-risk, high-reward situation. If you're in a dynasty league or a redraft league and you just want to push yourself over the edge for this season, great. That's pretty much the only value that he has to you right now because of the risk. However, he's such a risk that maybe he falls to you. He could certainly fall a lot later than 21, and he could outscore 21 if he outscore the 21st wide receiver spot if he turns out to be healthy, but he really won't be. So that's what we've got for A.J. Green. There's not much to say there. It is sort of a boring situation, and yet is one that had to be covered. Let's move on. All right, guys, now we've got wide receiver Tyler Boyd. Boom, staying on the same roster at the same position. What do we think about him? Last season, he had 76 catches for over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns off of an impressive, I believe it was about 13.8. I could definitely check that. Yards per catch, 13.5, excuse me. Anyways, he had a good year. He had a very good year. And so we were wondering, looking into these stats, okay, this is sort of his range. We were thinking of this sort of like 20 to 25 range, but does he go higher? What's AJ Green going to do to affect him? What's the quarterback situation going to do to affect him? How's the like we looked into all these analytics, and for the first time ever, I don't know what to tell you right now. AJ Green was there, he wasn't. Tyler Boyd didn't play any differently with or without AJ Green in. Andy Dalton, same thing. Andy Dalton, it didn't make a difference what quarterback was playing, what wide receivers were out, how their defense did. Yeah, not every game he was perfectly consistent, but as a whole, he just played the same all throughout the season, no matter who was in or who was out. I'm not sure what that means. I think what that means is he's a fairly talented wide receiver. He's not going to be an elite wide receiver, but he definitely deserves to be one of those wide receiver twos in that top 25 range. I do like the consistency. It definitely seems that he's a guy with a ceiling and a high floor, maybe a bit of a low ceiling, or maybe a medium ceiling. I don't necessarily want to call it low. So that was an absolute anomaly, but for a guy to get you 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, that's got to put him in the top 24, make him a solid wide receiver too. And you know what? Maybe he breaks out this season. Maybe he surprises us. But as we looked into the numbers, it was hard to find even breadcrumbs that suggested he would do more than that, except that that was really his first breakout season. So we want to hope for more. But then it's like the quarterback situation's still not better. AJ Green's situation's still not better. So there was a lot of question marks there. And that's why we are not going to jump out there and say, hey, huge prediction here. We want this guy. We think he's going to step up. We do like him. He very well could step up, but that is far from a guarantee. So let's move on to our next guy. Drop a comment down below if you have any more questions. This is a pretty brief description of Tyler Boyd and what we're expecting from him, but it's really all we have at this point. I can definitely look into it a little bit more if you'd like me to. All right, guys, so here we've got Robert Woods. Now, Robert Woods is an interesting situation. He had a really good year last year, but Cooper Kupp missed. So how do we really evaluate that? Well, we look at it. He finished as the wide receiver 18 last season. That is pretty good, right? That is very good. So that alone has to keep us in consideration of him. But when you look at the fact that Cooper Kupp missed about half the games and he's the clear-cut #1 wide receiver, we don't expect him coming back from that. Expect Robert Woods to stay at number 18, so we do drop him down a bit. Now, his average draft position last I checked was about 26, so that lines up relatively accurate with where we have him ranked. Now, he's going to benefit from possible slow return by Cooper Kupp. Not even necessarily that Cooper Kupp's going to miss any games, because I don't expect that, but I definitely wouldn't be surprised if he comes out week 1 or week 2, and the offense is just a little slow with him, just to make sure, just kind of see what they've got going on. He is the best wide receiver on that roster, and he's one of the best options, and so I definitely think that they want to keep him safe. He also really gets hurt a bit by just a major drop. So, excuse me. The top 50 wide receivers last season scored 282 touchdowns combined. When you go back to just 2014, the top 50 wide receivers scored 339. For whatever reason, the better quarterbacks are getting, and I think we're really having a recent increase in the talent pool of quarterbacks. They're spreading the ball out more, and wide receiver 3, 4, and 5, tight end number 2, running back number 2, running back number 1, whatever. They're getting more touchdowns, and the top 50 wide receivers are getting less. I don't know what exactly that reason is for, but it's happening, and so I think that's something that hurts this guy a little bit. But anyways, he is a very talented guy. He might fade down the stretch a little bit because of everything that's happening there. Brandon Cooks and Cooper Kupp and Todd Gurley. Although one benefit is that Todd Gurley's going to see less targets. He's going to see less carries. He's just going to see less usage with really the arthritis he's struggling with and how he finished last season. They would be dumb to give him the same amount of carries and the same amount of reps and just wear his body down. So they could look to run the passing game a little bit more, or maybe use a backup running back a little bit more. And that could definitely give Robert Woods a boost, but not a major one. I think this guy has got a high floor because he's insanely talented. He's an insanely good wide receiver, but a very low ceiling, a ceiling about right where he's at now almost. All right, guys, so here we have Tyler Lockett. Now, Tyler Lockett had a great season last season. He was phenomenal. People were shocked. He is a #1 wide receiver with a great quarterback in Russell Wilson. Why is he at 24? Because I know, and I've heard from people already, why is he not higher? So here's the reasons that we wanted to address. Now, Rob actually did the research for Tyler Lockett, so I'm just going to read from you what he said. For starters, his production was just too high. when you look at what he was able to do, there's no way that he's going to be able to keep up that production. Now, he had an extremely low level of targets and receptions, and so his targets will probably go up, but I imagine there to be a fairly steep drop-off in his production. In fact, did you know, I don't know how he did this, but he actually generated a league best pass rating of 158 when targeted, or I believe best or second best. It was one of the top two. It's either him or Calvin Ridley. My memory is not doing me well right now. But he also, of catchable balls, so the balls that were thrown at him, the targets that he got that were catchable, he didn't drop one. That's absolutely insane. That number will not be repeated. Now, that was sort of done simply because he had low targets, but also maybe he's just an amazing wide receiver. That's also true, but also just a little bit of luck or whatever you want to call that. I don't know how he managed to do that, guys. You look at DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't care who they are. They drop catches. Tyler Lockett will drop catches this year. His efficiency will go down, I would say, not quite a bit, not significantly, not to scare you, but noticeably go down a little bit. But his volume will probably pick up a little bit. And so that's what we got to say on Tyler Lockett. He fits in here at 24. All right, so we just talked about this guy briefly. Calvin Ridley, I love Calvin Ridley at this spot. Now, because Julio Jones is there, I think he's got a little bit of a ceiling. I don't think he's going to be a tier 1 wide receiver, but he could certainly jump up above this number 25 spot. He comes out as a rookie over 800 yards or 800 yards-ish, and he has 10 touchdowns. Those are great numbers. I can't even count 5 wide receivers as a rookie that had 10 touchdowns. I think Mike Evans did it, and that's the only guy I can remember. He also had 91 targets and 64 catches. That's what I want to highlight. 91 targets and 64 catches is actually low. That number needs to go up this season if he's going to break beyond the top 25. If he's going to break in the top 20 or the top 15, if he's going to take it to the next level, that's just too low. 64 catches isn't high enough. Now, the thing that benefits him is that he has had a huge increase in the offense. Just simply what Matt Ryan was able to do is just a huge boost when Calvin Ridley came along. So you can bet that they're going to use him a lot. You can bet that they see that correlation and that they're going to lean on this guy and give him more targets this year. It's not necessarily a safe bet, but it's a bet I'm making that Calvin Ridley's targets increase. Look at this. From 2017 to 2018, when Ridley shows up, Matt Ryan gets an extra 15 passing touchdowns, just shy of an extra 1,000 passing yards, an extra 1.2 adjusted yards per attempt, and an extra 16 points to his passer rating. Guys, Calvin Ridley is a great wide receiver. I think he's going to need a little bit more time to develop before he can hit that next level, but he does benefit being across from Julio Jones, who draws attention and yet doesn't like to find the end zone that much. That could definitely lean in Calvin Ridley's favor. All right, guys, so here we have Alshon Jeffrey, and I'm just going to stop for a second and apologize right now because I feel like I'm struggling to talk a little bit, and I keep looking down at my notes, and so I want to say it is 3:51 in the morning. I am exhausted, so please just give me a break. But anyways, let's talk about Alshon Jeffrey. So this guy comes out, he's in his 7 seasons in the NFL. His per game averages put him over 1,000 yards. Pretty much on average over a season. That right there tells us he's a very talented guy. His numbers have dropped slightly when he left from Chicago, and now he is here in Philadelphia, or there in Philadelphia playing for the Eagles. But he's a good wide receiver playing with a great quarterback. I looked into some of the numbers. Carson Wentz has 54 touchdown passes in the last 24 games. That is on pace for a 36 touchdown pass season. Of course, he hasn't been healthy either of the last 2 years. And so I love that this is one of the guys who benefits from a very, very good quarterback. You know, I would say there's maybe 7 or 8 very good quarterbacks in the NFL. Carson Wentz is one of those elite guys, and Alshon Jeffrey as a number 1 wide receiver seriously benefits from that. However, that number 1 wide receiver status gets challenged a bit when the ball gets spread around so much. There's him, Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, Nelson Aguilar, and Deshaun Jackson. So there's definitely a lot of room to throw around. Plus, they added 2 new running backs. I especially love Miles Sanders. If you follow us on Instagram, I just made a post about him recently, and I'm planning to make another one in the future. I love that guy. And so there's just a lot of weapons in that offense, and that's what keeps him from that next tier. He struggled to find the end zone because there's just so many guys. They get in that red zone, and as a defense, who do you cover? You got to cover Alshon Jeffrey, and you got to cover Zach Ertz. Who else do you cover? There's just so many other options, and so It's definitely something that hurts him a little bit, and I feel like in part if there was less options he'd do better, although maybe he'd do worse. Anyways, this is where he's at. Alshon Jeffrey is a very safe choice at this pick. So here we have Mike Williams. I like Mike Williams. This guy had an awesome year last year. I believe he had 10 touchdowns. He had a great year and really seemingly came out of nowhere, and yet it shouldn't be out of nowhere. This guy was, what, 7th overall when he was drafted a couple of years ago. He's a first-round pick. He's very talented. He's got a good build, and even more is going for him. So Tyrell Williams leaving is huge. These guys are both guys who can make deep ball plays. They're very athletic. They can go down the field, stretch the field quite a bit, and make these huge plays. That benefits him a lot because he really becomes the sole guy in that offense that I really trust to do that. Now, he had 64 targets, 43 catches, 664 yards. That's low, but his 10 touchdowns on just 43 receptions is a touchdown basically every 4 catches. Now, that's a ratio you'll never see. You won't see that again. It's not going to happen, but that's insane. That's because this guy is a producer. He's effective, and he's getting the job done. He's making the most of everything that he has an opportunity to. That's proved even more by his over 15 yards per catch. Mike Williams, I don't absolutely love him. He's got to deal with Hunter Henry and Keenan Allen above him. But in an offense where Melvin Gordon's an iffy situation and Phillip Rivers is a good quarterback, that's not too much of a problem. And I very well expect this guy to have a very similar season to what he had last year. So I like him a lot here, Mike Williams. If you guys have any concerns, let me know about him. But I currently can't think of any. All right, guys, so here we got Robby Anderson. Now, Robby Anderson was really supposed to break onto the scene last season, but it didn't quite happen, leaving many people disappointed and wondering, can he break onto the scene this year? Can he have a breakout season? Or what's going on with this guy? Is he a dud? Now, he really broke out. Weeks 14 through 16, he averaged 7 catches, 104 yards, and a touchdown. Over that stretch, he averaged a touchdown over that 3 games, and so that's phenomenal. He really stepped up over that stretch at the end of the season. I love that rapport with this young quarterback, Sam Darnold, who is developing. I don't think Sam Darnold's an amazing quarterback, but he's getting better, and that's what counts. It's going to be a step up from last season, and you better expect better quarterback play this year. Not only that, you talk about fantasy numbers. I love a fast, deep ball threat with 13 touchdowns in his last 24 games. That's essentially an 8 or 9 touchdown season out of this guy. Of course, Sam Darnold looks matured. He played really well down the stretch against a couple of good defenses. Excuse me, blanking out here. And I think things really bode well for him. But there's one stat that really particularly excites me, and this is kind of getting into some really in-depth numbers, but Le'Veon Bell. He is going to seriously help that offense. Did you know that Sam Darnold finished dead last in play-action passer rating? Their running game was so bad it hurt their passing game, and they're finally getting a running back. They're getting a good running back who can help open up the field on passing downs as well. That's going to help Robby Anderson because a lot of the struggle Robby Anderson had was they went 3 and outs. They weren't finding the end zone. They weren't creating drives. And so that right there is going to create a lot more touches for him and a lot more opportunity. Robby Anderson has a high ceiling. He's a little bit undersized, but the wide receiver position, that's not quite as big of a deal as, say, the running back or tight end position. So I love Robby Anderson as far as his high ceiling, though he also does have a bit of a low floor. All right, guys, it's time. We got to talk about Josh Gordon. So let's set up kind of focus here about this. This is an interesting situation. So for those of you who don't know, he has been reinstated back into the NFL. For those of you who are really out of it, he was suspended for lifetime from the NFL and not allowed to play. He goes in, he applies to appeal that, or he appeals that, and he wins, and he's back in. And in fact, he's back in the NFL with no suspensions for no games, nothing like that. He'll be playing the whole season as far as we know right now. I'll drop a comment down below if that changes, because it could, but that's what we know right now, and that's huge. Guys, so many of you are so tired and so bored and so frustrated and just sick and tired of this guy and his drama that you're going to not draft him even when you should. His name alone and the annoyance with it is just going to have him falling down draft boards, and that's kind of too bad. Last year he had 71 targets and 41 receptions, 737 yards and 4 TDs, plus 18 yards per catch. He did all of that in just 12, not even full games. Because he comes in, he plays a quarter. He plays a quarter with the Browns and still manages a touchdown, and then that's it. That's all he played with them. He didn't even play the full game, so I don't know how that happened. And then he comes in misses a few games, misses a few weeks, plays with the Patriots. But he's only playing, the first game he only plays a quarter or a couple quarters, he only plays a few drives. He's still learning the offense. He had a limited kind of a route tree. And yet he was still on pace had he played a whole season with the Patriots. 95 targets, 55 catches, and 5 TDs. Not amazing, but good for a guy who's just bouncing around left and right from one team to another and learning a new offense. Keep in mind the Patriots have one of the most confusing and complex offenses in the NFL, so that was also a real struggle for him. Extra targets are going to be added because Rob Gronkowski is gone. This is a guy who could easily have 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. I'm not saying that as a stretch. I'm not saying it's very possible. I mean, like, it's very likely. It is very likely he hits 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. If he doesn't, I'm not terribly surprised, but if he does, that's sort of what I expected. And so I think Josh Gordon, don't let burn bias bother you. Don't let the annoyance, don't let the off-the-field issues, anything like that bother you. He's fine right now, and I think he's going to fall pretty darn far, and I like this guy. But that's just the thing. He's here at 29. You could probably draft him at 40 if you wanted. So that's Josh Gordon for you. Leave a comment down below and let me know if you want more about Josh Gordon, any more questions you want to talk about it. All right, guys, so now we've got Dante Pettis. I like this guy. For starters, he's one of those last few guys that's going to be a wide receiver one, a true wide receiver one for an offense that has some potential. He had a great year last year. In fact, in the last 4 games, not including Week 16 versus the Bears because he got hurt in the second quarter, so we want to scrap that. But the last 4 games other than that, he averaged 4.25 catches, 4 touchdowns in that stretch, 338 yards, and he had 84.5. Excuse me. Anyways, sorry, I'm very tired. Like I mentioned, anyways, over 16 games, those numbers come out to over 1,300 yards. Comes out to 68 receptions and 16 touchdowns. Oh, now I'm tired. I'm half asleep. But 16 touchdowns sounds pretty darn good to me for a guy ranked at number 30. Of course, he's not going to keep up that pace, but it's unbelievable what he was able to do last year when he has an unproven starter come in the season to start, get hurt, so he gets a second stringer who gets hurt, and then he gets a third stringer. I don't know what to say or what to do. It's absolutely insane what he was able to manage during that stretch. Is a guy who's not going to be absolutely amazing, but he's a wide receiver one. And I think that right there speaks loads for him. And he's shown the talent. He's shown the ability. I'd love to watch this guy develop and see what he's going to do. He's a guy to throw on your bench. I don't think he's a guy, that comes in as a wide receiver 1 or a wide receiver 2. Certainly not. But he's a wide receiver 3 with high ceiling, high potential. So you got to like this guy, the pick here at number 30, especially with some of the other risky names we're talking about. He's not quite as risky as some of these other guys. All right, so here we come. We got Sterling Shepard. We got to put him in somewhere. For starters, a lot of people don't know he's actually still quite a young wide receiver. He's only 26 years old. And he's going to grow as a player. He's going to develop as a player. But the future is not what we're talking about now, so let's talk about what we got right now. For starters, he's got volume. He's the number 1 wide receiver, and that gets him a long ways. We just talked about that with Dante Pettis. Awesome. That's great. Like that right there gets you some volume. And really, opportunity is half the battle in fantasy, so that right there has to put him in the consideration as at least a wide receiver 3 or better. Now, in 6 games last year, he generated a pass rating of at least 118. 4 of those games came without Odell Beckham. So I think we've seen some signs, and not a whole lot, but we've seen some opportunity and some signs that he can produce without Odell Beckham. That's going to change this season when they have a whole year and he's the only guy and they're going to game plan as him as the number 1 guy. So that's going to hurt him. Another thing that's going to hurt him is the quarterback situation is bad, and he had just a 64% catch percentage last year. There's definitely some things to not like about this guy, but the pure volume and that offense's potential with Barkley and Ingram and him, it's looking good. It is looking good. And I think because Barkley there and Ingram is there and the quarterback situation is bad, you definitely have to say, okay, I don't know if he's going to explode onto the scene. I don't think he's going to be a 12 touchdown guy or anything like that. But he's got a high floor, and that volume is going to keep him as a good option, especially in PPR leagues. And so Sterling Shepard, I really like this pick. Again, depending on what your roster looks like, depending on your philosophy, if you're looking for a safe wide receiver 3, Sterling Shepard fits that bill perfectly, and I mean absolutely perfectly. All right, so now we've got one of the least exciting wide receivers in the NFL and one of the least exciting offenses in the NFL, Corey Davis. He's the Titans' number 1 wide receiver, so that's great. But like what I mentioned earlier with Dante Pettis and what I mentioned with the Giants, and it's just being the number one wide receiver is great. Number one wide receiver, excuse me, it's great. But it means a lot more in an offense that I see potential in to be a good offense or to be a great offense. I don't see that potential from an offense with a quarterback battle between a guy who just lost his job and a guy who should have lost his job a couple of years ago. That alone is pretty bad. The quarterback situation is awful. By the way, if you ask our preferences, we prefer them to start Tannehill over Mariota, but that is really it. And the volume isn't really there either. They threw the ball just 437 times last season, so that's not great. And really, when you look at it, look at this. Corey Davis was a wide receiver 3 or better in just 37% of his games last season. A third of the time, he's a wide receiver 3. 75% of the time, basically, or excuse me, nowhere near that. It's like 60 whatever. 60% of the time, 63% of the time, he's not even a wide receiver 3. This is a guy who very well could be a bench quarterback. Now, you're wondering why he does fit here in number 3. We're expecting they're going to go with Tannehill. We're expecting that offense is going to get better, and he's still a number 1 guy. So that's what puts him here, but he has got a low ceiling, and he is very not exciting. I guess that's the best way to really describe him. All right, so DJ Moore is insanely athletic. I'm so excited to see what this guy can do. I think this guy could be huge. I think he could be a top 20 wide receiver next year, but that's not this year. And this year, we've got some issues. Last season, he only had 2 touchdowns. That's bad. We need to see more production out of him. He had 54 catches on 74 targets, just shy of 800 yards, and a solid 14.5 yards per catch. So like I said earlier, that's great. He also had 7.9 yards after catch per reception and 17 avoided tackles. The athleticism is there. The talent is there. The offense struggled, so only found the end zone twice. And we've got this whole Cam Newton injury, health concerns. He's going to be less mobile. That's going to hurt the offense. They're going to be able to focus on the running game. That's going to hurt the offense. I'm steering clear as daylight, as far away as I can from that offense. But DJ Moore is too talented not to put here. This guy has shown just to be one of the most purely, insanely athletic wide receivers out there. And what he can do after the catch, that alone deserves mentioning in this video at some point. And so DJ Moore is not an amazing fantasy pick, but he's so athletic, and especially in a dynasty league, I like this guy as a solid keeper. All right, so Will Fuller, one of the most injury-prone wide receivers in the NFL. Yeah, we all know that. But at some point, like it happened with Keenan Allen, the injury is either going to stop his career or they're going to stop, period, and he's going to break out. It happened with Keenan Allen. It very well could happen with Will Fuller. Will Fuller finished 16th in points per snap and 16th in points per touch, so he's already double that from where he's ranked. He's already did double that last season. In all 3 seasons he's been in the NFL, his catch percentage, yards per target, yards per reception, and passer rating generated have increased all 3 years. He is getting better. He's making plays. He's improving, and he's got a great quarterback. Now, he's not a number 1 wide receiver, but it benefits him to be across from such a great guy in DeAndre Hopkins, who, by the way, led the NFL with 34% target share last season. The only downside being he's competing with Keke Coutee for that number 2 wide receiver position, but it's not a major competition. 1, I think he's the better wideout, and 2, Coutee is currently injured right now and struggling with that ankle problem or whatever's going on there, and so I give the edge, pretty solid edge, pretty obvious edge, to Will Fuller. We got to put him in at this spot. He is a very talented guy. It's insane to think not last season, but the year before he had 7 touchdowns in 10 games, I believe it was. I don't know how he did it, but that is crazy. All right, guys, so now we've got Sammy Watkins. Sammy Watkins is a guy who he's got a high floor. He's got a low ceiling. His high floor comes from Pat Mahomes and his 50 passing touchdowns as the number 2 wide receiver in that offense. That alone looks pretty good. But with Kelsey, Tyreek Hill, McCole Hardman, who's been tearing it up at practices, and Williams, he's got a low ceiling. And I think he's very limited as what he can do. Damian Williams is one of the best pass-catching backs in the NFL, at least according to some metrics from last season, where he led all running backs in catch percentage. Of course, he's got almost inarguably the best tight end in the NFL, one of the best deep threat slot wide receivers in Tyreek Hill, and a great rookie biting at his heels for that number 2 position in McCole Hardman, who I love, by the way. Last year he played in just 9 games, or I believe he started just 9 games. It might have been 10 games that he played. However, he had 500 yards, 40 receptions, and 9 TDs. Sammy Watkins is going to get his touchdowns, and that's what I like about this guy. Added value and standard league bonus. Can you say it? Repeat after me. Touchdowns are king in fantasy. I know that's obvious, but he's a guy who isn't ranked super high, but could get you 10 touchdowns. And that right there is a great reason to mention him and put them here at this spot because of that prolific offense. Here we've got Jarvis Landry. This is a pretty simple situation, guys. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I'm not going to waste a lot of time. Duke Johnson being gone takes away some targets away, and for a guy who's a PPR specialist, that's great. Put him in a PPR league. He's awesome. High floor, low ceiling. He's got a good tight end there and a good number 1 wide receiver in Odell Beckham. He's got a pretty good quarterback, a good running game. Everything seems to be in place for him to be a pretty spectacular average wideout. And so nothing fantastic, nothing amazing, but he definitely comes in at this spot simply because he's safe. And I love to get a guy at 36. If I was the last person to pick my wide receiver 3 and I got Jarvis Landry, I'd feel good about that. That it means that I was able to get some running backs or tight ends or secure my other positions first and then just fall back on a safe wideout 3. I'm fine with that. That's really could be a lot worse. Now, Dede Westbrook, I'm going to put this out there right now. This is just like the Jarvis Landry thing. I don't love him. I'm not excited about him. I'm not going to talk him up. I don't think he's amazing. He's a wide receiver 1 with a improved quarterback situation this season. We don't know how much the quarterback situation is going to improve, and we don't know how good of a wide receiver 1 he can be, so we have to put him here at this spot number 37. He could certainly climb. Who knows? We've seen it before. But I am just not putting a lot of faith in an offense that has an iffy running back situation, an offensive line that's below average, an unproven quarterback, and I'm saying that about Nick Foles. I don't know if I trust him as a starting quarterback for a whole season because that's different than what he's been doing. However, he was fanatical. He was insane. I loved watching him. But he just really hasn't seemingly proven that. And he did it 1 year where he was fantastic. That was a long time ago in a different offense. I don't know if he can do it in the Jaguars offense. And so I guess I should clarify that before the Nick Foles fans come out and cut my head off. I don't trust any quarterback in this offense. I don't trust Brady. I don't trust Pat Mahomes. Jaguars offense is brutal. And so Dede Westbrook comes in here at this spot. Could be higher, could also be lower. I guess we'll see his guy take a shot on. There's a reason he comes in outside of the starting wide receiver range. Now here we've got Tyrell Williams. This guy was buried as the number 3 wide receiver on that roster last year behind Keenan Allen and Williams. There was also Gordon, Eckler out of the backfield. And then, of course, they've got Antonio Gates at tight end. He got a few touchdowns. He was just buried. Automatically, he moves up to the wide receiver 2 in an offense without 2 good receiving running backs because the Chargers have 2 good receiving running backs, without a tight end, and without a bunch of other wide receivers. That right there is huge. On top of that, in just 10 games, he had 41 catches, 550 yards, and 5 touchdowns. That is insane. You give him an increased role and go from 10 games up to 16, 10 touchdowns is achievable. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. I don't have a whole lot of faith in that offense, especially if something happens to Antonio Brown. It might happen to Antonio Brown. He can continue to get injured or have off-the-field issues. It's a very scary situation. But Tyrell Williams has a very high ceiling. However, he's got a low floor because he's not a fantastic route runner. He's really just a deep ball threat. And if Antonio Brown is gone and all they have to do is say, okay, run a fly and we'll cover you with a safety, like that's very easy to game plan for. And I imagine he'd disappear quite a bit. But if Antonio Brown is there, stretch the field and take advantage of the double coverage on Brown, then he can really shine as a good fantasy option. All right, so here we come now, guys. We have got Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Now, we project him to be the number 2 wide receiver in Green Bay, but not by much. And here's what I want to address with you guys. He had some great numbers, some great metrics last season. He generated a pass rating of 95.4. He had 5.7 yards after the catch per reception. He actually was 3rd best in the NFL for separation rate at 70% separation rate. Number after number, he did good. However, Geronimo Allison is there. Of course, Davante Adams at number 1. He's going to get like 14 touchdowns. He's going to be insane. Touchdowns were a little bit down recently with Aaron Rodgers, who had just 25 last season. There are some minor concerns, but the big thing that we need to say is that I think the problem with it is he might be the number 2 for a 4-game stretch and then become the number 3 if Geronimo Allison gets hot and then become the number 2 again and then back to number 3. I don't trust, and I think Rob agrees with me, him to be the solid number 2 all season long. If he does that, he rockets up this rankings and he comes maybe even in the top 30 and he gets a serious boost and he has a good year. But I don't know if we trust him to do that. It's been a while now. We were getting some great quotes earlier in OTAs and minicamp and practices were first starting this offseason about how great he was doing. Things from Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers were great news. And then we just stopped hearing things. And that's not necessarily a red flag, more like a yellow flag, like just slow down, okay? Maybe he's not going to be quite as fantastic as we're expecting. Still going to be good, but not quite as fantastic. All right, and so this final spot, we got to give it to James Washington for a few reasons. Now, James Washington plays in an awesome offense, and he's very athletic. That right there puts him on this list and could put him a lot higher if we, well, I'm going to get to that in a second. But there's an offense that produces countless good wide receivers. I mean, Mike Wallace they produce Emmanuel Sanders, Antonio Brown. I don't know what it is, but they just have, ever since I've watched football, they've had a good wide receiver. I mean, even way back when they beat the Cardinals in the Super Bowl, they had Santonio Holmes. Like, they've just always had good wideouts. Good for them. I don't know what it is about their coaching scheme and their staff. They have good wideouts, and it works for them. James Washington very well could be one of those wideouts. He could be the next Emmanuel Sanders. He's got the athleticism. He's got the talent. However, he's very unproven. We've yet to see him play really as a number 2 and play as a good star. There's a bit of concerns with that offense, having losing Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. There's a lot of talent missing. And I think one of the things being is that they brought in, I believe, Dante Moncrief, who could very well fight for that number 2 spot, and James Washington could be a number 3 wideout. If he becomes a number 3 wideout, yeah, then this spot even gets bumped out of 40, and Dante Moncrief gets moved in. We're expecting him to beat Moncrief, but that could be a back-and-forth battle all season long, and this just goes back to the Marquez Valdez-Scantling thing. We want to say, hey, he's a top 30 wideout. Look, go get this guy. He's awesome. He's going to be great. But we just don't know if he's going to earn that spot. In this offense, whoever earns that spot is going to be easily in the top 40. He's going to be higher than where he is now, but we don't know if he's going to do that, and that's our concern. I'd love for you guys to drop a comment down below and actually just say, hey, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, James Washington, where do you guys think they're going to land? Who do you think is going to be the number 2 wide receiver in those rosters? But we had to bump these guys down for that reason, because I'm not going to sit here and lie to you guys and pretend that because we've gotten a couple of pieces of good news about them that they're going to be elite and they're going to be insane. We just don't know that. So guys, that's all I have for the video here. Went through 40, I believe now. Got all these research on these guys. If you want more information, make sure to leave a comment down below and let us know. Again, sorry, it's a very late night. It is 4:20 exactly right now. I am exhausted. I'm going to finish editing this video to upload, and then I'm going to pass out. You guys have a great day, and God bless.